the Lily Grace Lifestyle Podcast. Izzy Atkinson, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
So excited to have you. You have great energy. When you walked in the room, it just felt like a ray of sunshine.
Thank you.
And we're going to be talking a lot today about breakthroughs, breaking down, anything in between, and then rising back up, which we love.
Love that.
And the question I always ask my guests is, what defines your lifestyle?
That's a good question. What defines my lifestyle? It's a very holistic approach. But to your point, you said energy. For me, like everything is energy. And so very much about how does the energy feel and how's it going to make me feel? And I feel like that has defined my lifestyle in terms of wellness, routine, kind of how am I pouring into myself and how am I feeling good, which then I can, give to others.
Spread to others.
Yeah.
And you just got back from a very deep and meaningful trip. Can you talk to us about your breakdown, your breakthrough, and how you got to that point?
Yeah, of course. So I was in Costa Rica I just got back. I was on a 2-week trip. I had been to Costa Rica before. So what I like to say to people that haven't done any solo traveling is that it changes your life in the best way possible. And so I had went to this spot in Costa Rica a couple years ago, and at that point in my life, I was in a breakdown, very rock bottom moment, had just turned 30 a few months prior, almost a decade-long relationship breakup, life was imploding, you just get very lost. And I was like, who am I? Where am I going? What am I doing? And I was really called to the energy of Costa Rica, the beauty, all the things. I had a very spiritual experience there and got a lot of guidance, not only from people, but just from the energy. And it really changed my whole life after that. And so what some people people say a spiritual awakening. Maybe that's what it was. But I think for me, it was just really, it gave me inner strength and trust in myself. And yeah, I met a shaman. It was just all these really interesting experiences. So then I find myself here a couple years later, having just been laid off and just had a really rocky first half of the year. And just, heartbreak, all these different things. And I'm like, oh my God, how much can one take?
Yeah.
All the while trying to plan a big transition to California in a couple months. And so kind of again through a breakdown, the layoff was sort of the final straw.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times in moments where we are having a breakdown or we're feeling lost, it's very easy to panic. It's very easy to fall and not know how to get back up. And the reason I went to Costa Rica is I said, I'm either going to fall and I'm going to be stuck there for a while, or I need to find a way to take care of myself and put my oxygen mask on. That looks different for everybody. And I think in your life, it shows up differently at times. But for me in this moment in time, with the big transition ahead and just so many things falling apart at once, I felt called to go to a place where I had found myself years prior. But this time was different because I did not need guidance from external things, right?
Wow.
I wasn't looking for, by chance running into a shaman or, some of these crazy experiences I had prior there. I really went there to be in my own energy, to be with myself, and to pour into myself. Again, when you're in a big breakdown in your life and, things are hitting the fan, it's very hard to trust yourself in those moments, in my opinion, because you are convoluted with just emotions and triggers and opinions and all the things. So I went there and I was like, I need to go hear myself. I need to get back my own energy. I need to take care of me. And it was really an act of intuition.
Wow.
And it was amazing. It was a magical trip, everything I needed and more. And it felt like in a lot of ways something opposite of what a lot of people do in those circumstances. So I was glad that I listened to myself.
That's amazing. Thank you for being so vulnerable and open, because I'm pretty sure everyone listening has either been through a challenging time in their love life or in their career, and we've all been through that. So it's so relatable to any capacity. And It's so interesting that you mentioned the first time you were looking more for external signs and validations and clues, but this time was a totally internal experience, because I just read and I've been listening to a lot about the external mountain versus the internal valley. And I myself, maybe this is why we're here today, have gotten to a point where I don't need external validation or things to fill me up anymore. It's all internal.
Yeah.
So then you realize who your true self is, because at least for me, I was living with so many walls up to protect my inner self,
100%.
thinking that I needed the money or the symbol or the boyfriend or the name on the wall to feel full. But then when you get all that, you realize, like, I'm actually the same. I feel worse because it hasn't fulfilled anything. But the second you start to look within, which is really, really hard, you're like, whoa.
Yes.
I found myself.
100%. That's really been the journey I've been on the last few years. Like, so when we talk about the breakdown for breakthrough, like, my huge breakup years ago at a milestone birthday time, and like, you know, at that point I like went broke, had to find my own apartment, like everything was going wrong. My boss left my job, like tons of things were falling apart. But to your point, up until that point, I had done a lot of inner work in certain ways, but it was almost like all these things I had tied to my validation and self-worth. And, you know, I was hoping for the engagement and the wedding. And like, when all those things vanished, I'm like, who am I? Like, do I even love myself? You know, do I even know myself? And that's where, again, kind of with the solo travel, you really find yourself in a lot of ways. You have those experiences that you have to trust yourself, you challenge yourself, you're like totally out of your comfort zone a lot of times. So it helps you in those ways. But I can totally appreciate what you're saying, because I think that it's a journey a lot of people don't go on, and it's not always pretty. Like a lot of times when we look inward, we're like, oh, it's a little sticky in there.
Yes.
Like, how do I comb through that stickiness to get to the good stuff and expand myself more?
Yeah, it's a really uncomfortable journey. And messy, and sometimes you're like, whoa, I don't like any of this.
Yes.
So you really have to face your truth,
Yep.
which is something that some people, like you said, never do. But I'm grateful that we're doing it.
Me too.
And that other people listening may be going through the same thing.
Yeah.
And then I realized too, as you're going through this journey, you meet people along the way who are like this. Yes. On the same point of the path, or have been there before.
Yep.
And it's really interesting to just like connect in that way.
100%.
At a deeper level.
100%.
And how would you describe your self-love journey? So you mentioned this whole healing situation, and it's a journey. It's never ending.
Yes.
But where are you at now, and where were you maybe 5 years ago in comparison?
Yeah. Oh my God, it's such a journey. Journey is the key word. Oh my God, 5 years ago. Okay, I'm gonna be 33. Yeah, 5 years ago, I had definitely started to do some work on my self-love, you know, healing journey. But for me, where like sort of the pain points started way back when I was younger was getting into really bad, like abusive relationships at a young age, like you know, middle school into like high school young. And I had really bad body dysmorphia and disordered eating. So I'm super open about this now in my journey. It was a big part of acceptance and kind of removing that shame. So 5 years ago, I was definitely in a place of really working through, like, how do I stop putting so much worth in my body, my size, being pretty enough, thin enough, getting attention. And again, it's partly because my sort of story with my body, which I talk a lot about like on my social media, is that I was constantly being validated that my only worth was that I was this beautiful woman.
Right.
So I wasn't ever being validated for you're smart, you're driven, you're funny, you're right? So for me, it's like if I wasn't getting validation about my appearance, it's like I have no worth.
Right.
And then of course seeking out partners that only care about that and have really emotionally abusive tendencies. So, you know, 5 years ago, I was in that really long-term relationship, you know, looking back on it, not a healthy relationship. And so I was really, you know, peeling back the layers of body image. That was sort of my focus. I'd say in the last 5 years, the biggest thing has been seeing these sides of myself that, while hard to look at, helps you get clearer on who you are, why you might have those wounds to begin with.
Right.
and how to release the shame around it. So I think the hardest part of a self-love journey is almost finding, like, I don't even know if forgiveness is the word, but it's about finding sort of forgiveness, acceptance, and love for the parts of you that did accept less or did show up in a certain way because that's what you knew then.
Yeah.
Or that's where your trauma was, or that's what you believed you were deserving of. And so that, I think, today is very much where I am, where because I've grown so much the last 5 years and gone through so much in my self-love journey, that I'm still seeing parts of myself that have this really sticky feeling of unworthiness, right? Like that's like a lot of times the core wound for a lot of people is like, I'm just not good enough. I'm unworthy of love, of being happy, of success, abundance. For me, it's definitely a pain point with love because I've been in bad relationships that validated that wound all the time. So I've had to really learn to look at that wound and also to check myself when it's my like wound talking versus reality reflecting back to me. So that's a big part of the healing journey.
That's amazing. I feel like you're speaking my mind because I was thinking and saying the same things very recently too. I also, I think, went through my own body dysmorphia growing up and just being smaller and Asian in the whole white town that I grew up in New Hampshire. I was like, I'm different. And then it became like, I didn't think I was pretty, but then I realized, oh, maybe I am pretty. And then that's the validation I got from men. So I was also in very toxic, sticky, probably emotionally abusive relationships as well. And then you have to literally release, like you said, and give yourself grace and also unlearn a lot of the things that you taught yourself, and it's breaking the patterns. Because you can learn all these things, you can listen to us all day long, but until you change your behaviors and change your action, nothing else will change.
100%.
So it's amazing that you have that awareness and that you're able to articulate that, because it's just a powerful thing to come to.
Yeah, it's a huge realization in the journey. Obviously so aligned we're having this conversation. And it's been for me, like, you know, there's so many moments in your life that end up teaching you something or where you are unlearning. And what was really interesting for me with like kind of the love element of things, you know, even in a recent relationship, I was lucky enough to fall in love with my best friend, and that was great. And the timing just honestly was off for us, but I realized how much of my old wounding was still really manifesting for me.
Interesting.
Like, and even though I could see it and not necessarily act on it, it was there. And so that's, again, it's a journey. Like right now, I've definitely been in a few months lately of really reflecting like how many things I just made about me. And I think that when people talk about their healing journey, right? And if you've been in relationships where there has been emotional abuse, narcissism, you know, whatever you want to call it, you do create, there's this like loop that goes on in your mind of believing everything is about you, even if it's bad, because that's what you're led to believe. Like everything you do is wrong, or you're not worthy, or you're not pretty enough, good enough, successful enough. And so even trust, right? Like for me, with love, not only with myself, but also with another person, huge having to lean into trusting myself now. Like, oh, I made bad decisions with partners before. Like, this is safe and healthy, but can I trust myself? That, like, so there's so many layers to these healing journeys, really.
Oh, totally. And I love the topic of love because
Me too.
It spills, I love love, first of all, but I love that it spills over to every other part of your life. And I heard this quote that relationships are mirrors. And then looking back, I was like, oh my goodness. It was ugly and hard and challenging. But then you look at not just the love life aspect, but the friendships and the family members that you become close to and the people that you drive with. And you're like, well, you can see if you've come a long way. And I think sometimes people stick to their friend group from high school or college, it stays. But for me, it's been like this, kind of flowing, because I realize I've just grown so much, so rapidly in the past year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So it's just interesting to see how that evolves. It creates a different external world for you.
100%. And that's such a real thing. You outgrow so many. I always say, like, you outgrow so many of the spaces you were once in.
Yeah.
Whether that was like an intimate romantic relationship, friendships, career. I mean, like, whatever. And there's grief in that.
Totally.
Even when it's good.
Yes, agreed.
I think about this all the time. Like,
Me too.
I really am actually in a really beautiful, transformative space in my life, in a good way.
Yeah.
But it has come with so much grief.
Yes.
Like, and
for your old self. Too.
Yes, my old self. Or even, like, again, having the realizations of, like, oh my God, I used to think and act this way, and this isn't serving me, but it did then, like, and it's confusing, and now I love myself so much more that, wait, I'm like, there's so much grief and change, and it can be really difficult. And so something even with old friends, probably some people always say, like, have their high school friends, and I'm similar. I have friends from a lot of chapters of my life, but I recognize, and especially when you're on your own healing journey and self-love growth journey, you can see people that aren't. And for me, it's never from a place of judgment, but I will notice how there is definitely a big separation for me, because I can see someone, consistently making choices that makes them really unhappy, or, and no one's perfect, but it's just the point of, like, you keep growing, someone stays the same. It's almost like you feel dragged down if you're going this way, but someone's here, and every time you're trying to meet them.
Or guilty, too.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel guilt, and I always now realize, too, it's not so much about how people make you feel when you're together. I mean, that's great.
Right.
But it's about how they make you feel when you are not together.
Right.
Whether it be love or friendship or parents or anything, because it's like, how much headspace are they taking up in your mind?
Right.
And physical space as well, but it's true, because our time is precious, and it's like,
100%.
what are you spending your time on? Are you worrying about this person and what you said and feeling insecure about your decisions that you made the night before or something like that? So it's just very interesting to see.
I totally agree.
So cool. And would you say at this point you fully love yourself?
I would say yes.
I love that.
Yeah, I do love myself. And I think with that comes radical acceptance. Yeah. Like, we talk about self-love all the time. And, I've worked with women in the body image space. I do a lot of coaching with women. I've been a personal trainer for a long time. So I'm always finding myself working with women in some area of their journey where they're feeling, at the beginning, usually really not good. Yeah. Whether it's body image, self-esteem, loss in themselves. And I always say to them, well, they're like, love is such a big jump. Like, I don't know how to get all the way over there. I'm like, well, how do we start to just accept ourselves? Yeah. And so for me, I'd say today, in this seat today, I absolutely love myself, but I really accept myself. And I think what comes with self-love, and I think what's beautiful about our conversation is what we're highlighting is duality. Like, you're in a healing journey and you're doing the work. Oh, there's grief in that, right? Or you're elevating yourself, you're saying bye to certain things. And so I even believe that expanding your sense of self-love and capacity to love yourself, you are expanding your ability to see yourself and your wounds and your pain and your trauma. And so for me, the more that I love myself, it actually comes with more, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm still thinking I'm this unworthy. I'm going to cry today and feel that feeling because it's very real for me. I'm still going to move through it with love. But to me, the more that I've learned to love myself, I've given more space for those things to sort of show their face and move through them.
Yeah. Versus like stuffing them down.
Oh, yeah.
Or covering it up with external things or substances. It's so interesting because same here. I feel like the more pain and the more I've allowed myself to feel emotionally, the more openness I feel in my heart and my energy, which is crazy. It's like duality, like you said.
It is.
It's fascinating.
It's fascinating, and it's something I've thought a lot about. How I think it was a therapist of mine at one point said to me in my journey at some point, which was like, love and pain, they sleep in the same bed. The same, right? Like, but part of healing is that yes, in some ways you are expanding your tolerance for pain, but you're expanding your tolerance also for love and joy. And that's the biggest thing, is that, like, even when we talk about romantic relationships or love in general, there's actually so much fear around it, right? Like, oh my God, I'm constantly like, can I let that wall down? Like, come on. And it's because we have painful past, history, trauma, all the things. And part of the healing journey is when you see yourself, learn to love yourself, you're honestly expanding your capacity for love, to give it, to receive it. That's something I've learned so much in my like recent romantic relationship, was really about the capacities of love, right? Like, we really love each other, and it's fascinating of like how scary that is, right?
Yes.
And how much pain that can bring up. Oh my God, if you really see who I am, there's so much at stake, right? Because the love is real, and people that are self-aware can have these conversations, right? It was refreshing to be in a romantic relationship where I could.
Wow.
Yeah, super self-aware in a person, which is great. But again, it's part of what comes up is like when you even start receiving healthy love, it can bring up, oh my God, I've never had this before. I feel so sad for the 32 years of myself that didn't have this.
Yeah.
So this is where it's just, it's
crazy.
It's a duality all the time.
Yeah, it's true. And same here. Now being in a healthy relationship after a few not so healthy ones, it's like scary. And
totally.
I'm like, this is actually really sad.
Yeah.
I've never felt this safe before and open and like felt just loved before. It was just so interesting.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating. And what modalities have you used to heal and find self-love? Because we talked about how you felt and how far you've come, but do you meditate? I know you dance. I know you have a podcast. So like, what are the outlets that really help you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And they've changed, obviously, tremendously over the years. Therapy always was like a given because, again, my body image stuff started really young for me, and that was just very intense. So I was in therapy, so I guess, talk therapy for a very long time. And then, probably like 2.5 years ago, and I think this was also, again, through just the healing journey, that I started getting really called to movement. And it was partly because internally I was letting go of control a little bit in a good way, right? Like allowing flow.
Yes.
Allowing myself to not be so rigid. And so that like quite literally opened up my hips. And it's been a journey to see in the last few years. I'm like, oh, back then I was like kind of salsing, and now I'm like, oh, I can really move. It changes.
Totally.
But somatic practices are great. Last spring I did hypnotherapy. So that was like subconscious reprogramming. That was a combination with breath work. Amazing. I mean, so incredible, because there are points of different healing journeys for people where you realize, you're doing the work, right? Like you're showing up, maybe you're in therapy, you're journaling, you're meditating, you're like looking at yourself, but there's still these subconscious beliefs that can be so deep that you're like, my conscious mind, I feel worthy, I feel confident, I love myself, but you have this like, this programming on loop, just I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. And I was like, I need to try something different. Because my unworthiness wound was just so deep for me, especially, like I said, in romantic relationships. So hypnotherapy was amazing. It was just so pivotal, and it's something you can go back to. So breath work, hypnotherapy, journaling, getting in nature. I'm not a huge meditator, actually, believe it or not. But I am someone, even a healing modality for me, I say this to my clients, is I call them like empowerment walks, or like queen walk, or whatever you want to call it, where you put on like a high vibe playlist. And you just embody that energy. Oftentimes too, we get so wrapped up in life, the stressors of life, the hard things going on, that sometimes it's just like, okay, I need to check out for 30 minutes, go on a walk, put on music that embodies an energy I want to feel. That's why gratitude practices are so empowering. And so they really help people shift their energy. And that's the whole thing. It's energy, right? Like, how do you shift that? And so I really try to tap into things that help me shift my energy.
That's beautiful. I love all of those different things, and it's interesting you mentioned about the dance, like your old self was like a little more rigid and stuff, because same, I grew up dancing and I was scared to like do something wrong, I think, so I would just not do it or do it poorly, but now that I like am more in the flow state and the higher vibe, I'm just like, oh, okay, this feels good, and then all of a sudden you're doing these crazy things you didn't know you could do.
100%, and you're tapping into like more, for me, it's like also this feminine energy, and that is that flow.
It's huge.
And so many people, and like, it's not even meant to be about like men or women, right? Like everyone has the feminine, masculine energy, but the feminine energy is like, it's really hard to access in our world.
Totally.
Whether for anybody.
I didn't find it till like last year.
Yeah. Like seriously same.
Yeah, it's crazy because I think where we live in America, capitalism,
Yeah.
individualistic society, just the whole movement of women becoming amazing boss bitch education and entrepreneurs, all the things, it's empowering, but it's also, again, a duality of like, I'm a woman, I have feminine energy, but I can't act it out. I can't feel that in the work environment. So then you take it to your relationships, and then you're your boyfriend's mom, and it's not so great.
100%. And I think like most people can really relate to that at some point in their life. And it's about, you know, it's like, it's the slowness, it's the flow, it's the trust. And it's, to me, those things honestly for so long were like so counterintuitive, partly because, well, and even your intuition, that is like truly an innate feminine energy. Like when I trust myself and I listen to my voice versus everything else. But for me, it was blocked for so long because, again, like I was fighting my body. I was in relationships telling me, you don't even know yourself. And I'm like, wait, what? You're right. Wait, I don't? Like, we just become sponges to these narratives, beliefs, societal, you know, BS put on us. And you have to work really hard to say, no, this isn't a line for me. But it feels so good when you get into that feminine place.
And now that we're in this feminine place, do you have this thought? Sometimes I worry. I'm like, I'm so zen. I'm so vibey. I'm so flow. I'm like, what if I lost my like motivation? I still am very motivated. Yeah. But I've lost some of my intensity that I used to have. I realized. And I'm like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? What if I'm too feminine now?
Yeah.
Do you ever feel that?
Sometimes, and like currently right now I'm kind of feeling that because, you know, like I said, I got laid off from my full-time job just over a month ago, like, and just certain things have sort of fallen apart and I've been leaning into less. Yeah. So yes, I've totally had seasons like that, but that's actually how I usually feel. I'm like, I think this is a season. Right. And I think that maybe that'll be the case for you. And I've noticed it with a lot of, you know, women I work with and friends too, where like, yes, we go through seasons. So and it's interesting how even my body will start cueing me, like, we're ready to go. Yeah, true. Like, go time. And all of a sudden, opportunity. And maybe you can even look at your external world and be like, it's interesting how when certain things are flowing in with ease, that my body is saying yes and you feel energized. True. That's usually how I know. Because, like, for example, last spring, I was totally in, like, hermit mode, taking care of my body, really low-key, like, low flow, just rest, honestly, energy. And the more that I was taking care of my body, though, which is a big piece of the feminine, like taking care of your body, pouring into yourself, last summer I could like feel myself energetically being like, okay, like I'm feeling good, whatever, and like boom, just like opportunity after. But I was ready, you know? There were things where I felt drained.
It wasn't forced.
And so right now, I think a way to check in with your own energy too is, for me, part of why I even went to Costa Rica is I was noticing even things I love, I was like, I'm feeling drained by them. Like, people are asking me to lead a healing circle, I'm saying no. Like, what's going on, you know? And so that's another time to check in and be like, do I need some extra pause, extra rest? I do think that it'll come back, of course. Oh, yeah. But I think also as women, we're learning these different dualities within ourselves. And to your point, we have been, again, the boss bitch era is great, but it's like there's two sides to that coin. Totally. So we as women have just had such conflicting messaging our whole life of like, do this, be this, act this, show up this way, fight for your work. Like, so I don't know. I always say to people, when you're feeling that rest state, kind of lean into it, because there's usually a reason that your body is calling you to that for some reason.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in to this podcast episode. Without you, I would not be where I am today. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like, and follow the podcast. And if you haven't already checked out my vlog formatted videos, please do. There I show exclusive behind the scenes on my lifestyle, my routines, my travels, friends, business, relationships, etc. And it's the more laid back, low-key version of the life. Stay tuned for more, and thank you so much again. And let's get back into this amazing episode. Thanks for sharing that. You just have so much wisdom. And what do you do with women? You talked about fitness.
Yes.
And you talked about some healing situations and coaching and more therapeutic approaches to healing.
Yeah.
Can you explain kind of how you help people heal?
Totally. And it's funny because and again, as I'm sort of in a transitional place in my own life right now, it's interesting how even seeing how that's changing. Because my healing work with clients has changed every step of my journey that's changed. So really how it started was years ago. I was, working in corporate America and working in fitness, like just those two things. But I was sharing on social media all the time about my body image struggles and the work I had done to recover, because I had been like a bikini competitor. Like I really went through it with the binge, restricting, hating my body, obsessive therapy for years. But I think, and again, maybe I'm like put on this earth just to share certain things, but I started diving into my own healing, like on my own, as well as obviously with therapy. So I really was like starting to do that inner work, and I just changed my whole narrative with food, with my appearance, everything. And I kept going through like lesson after lesson almost. And so I just started sharing about it. And I would teach fitness classes, and women would come up to me after class and be like, how do I like get to know you better and like work with you? And I'm like, oh, I just wasn't, and it was not even a thought for me.
Yeah. Like
how could someone work with me? Because, I didn't go to school to be a therapist and things of that nature. And so I was like, I'm just someone who shares my journey.
Yeah.
But I also knew that I had leadership skills within me and certain things that I don't believe. I mean, I think you can be taught, but certain people just have them.
Oh, totally.
And energy is something I've been told my entire adulthood. Like, you have amazing energy, you hold space for people, you're vulnerable, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, there's something to these natural gifts I have that I'm offering to women, but not really doing from a business perspective.
Sure.
So the world shuts down in COVID. I still have my corporate job, but obviously fitness industry, everything changes.
Right.
So I launched an online group coaching program, which those were like huge in 2020. I feel like everyone on Instagram was like, I have a group coaching program.
Yes.
But I really wanted it to be something like super affordable and just for women that really were seeking out support.
Yeah.
But I created an entire kind of almost system of like, how did I do this, right? How have I gotten to where I'm at? And obviously through all my work, I was like, it isn't about food. Like, it's about how you feel about yourself. Yeah. It's about trauma, your family, it's all the things. So I was really lucky to have an amazing group of 4 women that first wanted to work with me. Just, incredible success. And one of the women, I knew all of them through the fitness industry, but one of the women, she's a pro squash player in the US. And so it was so cool to like work with an athlete and then see what she did with her platform after that. Like start talking about like, I've had an eating disorder my whole life and I've never talked about it till today. So that's really where it started, and it just kept sort of unfolding. So I had a couple rounds of that program. I did free community, like online groups of just like stronger together. Let's come together and talk about how we're struggling in the pandemic. How can we move through it? What's something that's coming up for you? So I just was like constantly drawn to helping people in that way. Personal training, of course, that is something where you are helping people, but all my clients definitely say they go to me more for probably therapy than fitness. I swear to God, because I'm moving in a couple months. They're like, who should I work with? And I'm like, well, I'm like, no one is really as much of a therapist as me when it comes to like fitness. So that's been amazing. Like, and I really wanted to, again, specifically work with women that really struggled with their body image or had disordered eating backgrounds, because the fitness industry, there's a lot of mixed messaging there. And so I was on a mission to change that narrative. Like, I even worked at, No Shade to Berries boot camp, but I worked there for a year and I was like, this isn't aligned for me. It's only thin women in sports bras. It's mostly white, affluent people. Like, this is not who I'm working with, and this is not who I'm serving. And so I wanted to work with women that were all body sizes, all capabilities, backgrounds, blah, blah, blah. And so personal training really took off for me, probably at the end of 2020 into 2021 when things were starting to open more. Really started thriving with that. And then again, it was just sort of like word of mouth. Like, people would be like, oh, my friend worked with you. She's struggling with X. And I'm like, yeah, I can absolutely support someone in, navigating trauma coming up in a relationship, because the bread and butter of the body image work is really, the way people feel in their bodies, it's a manifestation of pain and shame.
Yes.
So other things happening in people's lives is typically the same thing. It's just a different core wound or experience.
Yeah.
So I just sort of found myself, like, by word of mouth and connecting, to just find myself in those spaces. And then I got asked to be the president of the Soul Project, which is a nonprofit that works with women and young girls. I've been with the founder since the start, but I became the president a couple years ago. But again, that came with like, hey, can you lead workshops for young girls? Like, I was really in our growth stages.
Yeah.
And I would say yes. I was like, you know what, this is totally out of my comfort zone. But yes, like I know I have what it takes.
Yeah.
I know I can do it. And so it's been a natural progression. So even like healing circles, I did a circle on like grief. I've done circles on empowerment. I used to do mental health workshops in the city pre-COVID. Most of this stuff was not even like lucrative for me. It was truly all led from like passion and love. And, you know, I've been talking for a while. Last thing I'll kind of say on it is I think that a lot of us, what we go through and experience and heal and move through, what a gift to give to someone else. And so when I saw my life drastically shifting by not hiding behind my eating disorder, not hiding behind abusive relationships, and empowering myself in my story, and then I could do that for someone else and help them, I was like, oh my God. And so that's really been the trajectory. So now it's like I work one-on-one with I say I'm a life coach, but I feel like I am a coach of many hats. But I work with a lot of women one-on-one now. I do personal training. Like I said, I've done healing circles in the city. I've led workshops on different topics. Recently, I was asked to do like an opening healing circle and closing circle for another nonprofit. So it always comes back to my energy. People usually reach out and they're like, I love your energy. We've seen the work you do. Can you get involved with X?
Wow.
So it's very fluid. So I'm still learning what even my elevator pitch is.
I like that.
Like, I'm like, we're many hats. So
that's amazing. And that's why we get along, because same.
Yeah.
It's like great to have so many different modalities, or whatever you want to call it, of helping people, but it's coming from the same place of love and healing and health and trying to heal that trauma. And it's interesting what you said about food, because I was reading this book, it's called Mother Hunger, and it was talking about how food is basically a response to trauma, how you eat or what you eat, or how often you eat. And it's just so interesting. And same with how you treat your body, how you work out, how you treat other people. It's just all this loop of energy.
It really is. And that's why, you know, it's amazing the way we've sort of categorized even like body types and sizes, this and that, when you could meet someone in a body type that you would never think would be I am the most confident person on earth, and it's because they haven't had necessarily those beliefs, that trauma around X, Y, and Z, or they lived in an environment where food wasn't labeled as good and bad, and they lived in an environment where their body wasn't talked about in a negative way, or, you know, it's so fascinating to me, even generationally, like, you know, my mother, who's always empowered me, like, so it's not like I didn't get my body stuff from my mother per se, but even the other day, we were like a family trip a couple days ago in Maine, and, you know, my mom texted me being like, I'm not going to come on the beach in a bathing suit, I'm too chubby this summer. And it's like, honestly, you know, for me, especially with the work I do, it's like I'm really aware, but I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, it's just these even subtleties of these, and that generation especially, like,
my mom too.
Oh my God, that could be a whole other episode.
No, it's fascinating, and seeing like how social media has really maybe hurt us, maybe it's helping us a little bit with our body image and our confidence in general. And I love that you're using your platforms to really spread positivity and being vulnerable with people, because I feel like that's really where it all starts. Leadership is vulnerability, and to be a leader, you have to be able to connect with people, and that is amazing that you're able to do that every day.
Oh, thank you. It really is something that I've worked in so many jobs. Like, I've had so many jobs outside. I had a stable corporate job for 10 years, but outside that I was like Lululemon, different fitness job, you know, finding myself in constant different environments, different fitness studios, different entrepreneurial endeavors. And something that would always amaze me was leadership. And I was like, how on earth did this person end up being in charge of a company
Sure.
or being our boss. Because to your point, it's, yes, people lack a willingness and capacity and even an open-mindedness to be vulnerable.
Right.
But not only that, it's emotional intelligence and like a level of humanity.
Yes.
So my last boss at I had a really interesting experience in corporate America, and I was at my firm for 10 years. But I had 2 male bosses before my last boss, who's a woman. And this is not even about like men versus women, but it was just really interesting to see how they were 2 of the most successful partners at the firm, making so much money, bringing in, blah, 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 but had no connection with their teams, right? It was very robotic. It was very, you need to execute, work your ass off, blah, blah, blah. My final boss that came in, amazing. She didn't have a background in this world. She was the most human, like, centered leader I ever experienced in that world, and people loved her for that because she always was like, first we're people, then we do the work, right? If you're having a bad day, like, be a human here. And it was just fascinating to me, especially even working in corporate America throughout the pandemic and the world going to insanity all across the board. I mean, everything, even outside of just the pandemic. And how these leaders, they had no idea how to hold space. And I think that's what is part of at the core of vulnerability, is being comfortable with yourself, being able to hold space for yourself, which then allows you to see others and hold space for them. So I get that all the time, like, how do you hold space so well for other people? And I think it's because in my journey, I've gotten excellent at learning to hold space for myself. And, being able to peel back the lens of, or all the layers of a person and say, like, this is a human being at the end of the day in front of me. Even if you and I were to look back at our past partners, like, I would never choose that again, but I can look at, with a more healed lens, why they acted those ways, why I was treated that way by that person. And while it doesn't make it right, you can look at someone from a lens of saying, this is a really hurt person, and that's why they're hurting me.
And I was hurt myself looking back, and getting to a space that I got to about a year ago of just like saying sorry to myself, but also saying sorry to those people, even if they hurt me, is so powerful. And then allows for so much light energy to come into your space, because it's heavy. Like, a lot of this stuff is heavy, and it's interesting in the corporate America and just leadership roles in general, like, even in politics, which we don't want to get into, but it's just like these leaders have no idea.
Oh my God.
No idea. And they have probably so much stuck trauma and energy and need some therapy, like all of us do. But it's amazing to meet someone who's so human-centered and able to hold that space.
Thank you.
So cool.
Likewise.
And thank you. And you're going through a big transition period, which we mentioned a couple times. Can you talk to us about what's on the other side of this transition for you? What are you manifesting? What are the next steps for Izzy?
I know, it's so crazy. I'm a little woo-woo. So I'll probably drop in some like divine timing language here. But so yes, through that breakdown many years ago and then finding myself, solo travel was a big key part of my journey years ago. And so, God, what would it be now? 2.5 years ago, I was quite literally on a first date with someone, and he was like, I was talking about solo traveling. I was like, I want to go somewhere in March for a couple weeks. I'm still figuring out where. And he's like, you should go to San Diego. And I'm like, you know what? I've never been to California. I've never been to San Diego. Why not? He was just, this guy was like bumping up San Diego, San Diego. I said, you know what? Why not? So I ended up going to San Diego for 3 weeks, and I had an incredible time. Like, so much fun. You know, I knew people out there, but I just loved the energy. And you know, there's cliches of like a California person, but I definitely think I have certain qualities.
I can see that.
That vibe with Cali, just, you know, sort of the low key, free flowy energy, a little woo woo, whatever. So I loved it. And I was like, I'm moving here. And so 2 years ago, I'm not kidding, like 2 years ago to this day, I was planning a move to California with one of my best girlfriends at the time. And I was like, it's going to be amazing. But we had nothing planned. Like, we had nothing planned. We traveled there a few times. We were looking at apartments, but, like, nothing was set in stone. She backs out at the 11th hour. And I was like, you know what? I have nothing planned, but I'm going to figure it out. But I didn't actually really execute. So what I did is I put all my stuff here in storage. I sold a bunch of my stuff. I went there for, like, 8 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I traveled in different areas of California. But I went at the time also knowing that I wanted to go there to do inner healing. Like, I was like, I need to be by myself. I need to really emotionally purge. The ocean is an amazing place to do that. And I think when I look back, like, again, divine timing, there was some reason I didn't stay. I came back here, and if I were to think about it on a woo-woo scale, I feel like there were certain things within myself that I had to, like, integrate and do here. And I also think that there were certain things in my individual life I wanted to achieve here to almost feel like now I'm leaving Boston being like, I feel so good. I think had I actually stayed 2 years ago, I would have been running. So I had this amazing soulful experience. I was in California that whole fall. It was incredible. Met my best friend who was like a soul. He was like this total soul connection thing, like so crazy, the timing. We were both on a healing journey. And then I came back here. And I was like, and I was dead set that I was like, I'm meant to be in Boston. After that, I was like, I'm meant to be in Boston. I have so many things here I'm doing. This is where I'm meant to be. And then it's funny because last summer, I started feeling a pull a little bit to California, just like intuitively. I was like, I don't know why I'm like thinking about it. Cause I was like, I'm not going there again. Like, I'm not even gonna travel there. Like, I did what I needed to do. I was settled back in Brooklyn in my new place. Life was going really good here. But I kept getting this little like nudge. And I was like, I'm just gonna ignore that. I started dating my best friend. He lives out there. And so I started having a cross-country relationship.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, this is so crazy. Like, now here I am, like, in San Diego again. And I kept finding myself, though, loving being there. You know, like, feeling called there. And I was like, God dang it. Like, what am I going to do? I've done so much here. I'm not, you know, part of me just felt like, oh, my God, this is so scary. So many unknowns. It was really in January that I was, like, at the time wanting to manifest a bi-coastal relationship with him. Like, I was like, we'll figure out a way to be bi-coastal. He's from here, of course.
Okay.
So go figure. But it's almost like my soul kept being like, you're going to end up there. But I, again, was just sort of ignoring it. And then this spring, it just came on really strong, like intuitively, like, your next chapter is there. And so what I'm manifesting, what I feel now, because I'm going out there in, I don't know, 7-ish weeks, let's say, have an apartment, you know, like, I'm doing it this time. Like, I'm committed. I feel peaceful. I feel ready. I feel grounded about this decision. And again, 2 years ago, had I done it, I wasn't in that space. And I think that I had to grow and go through a lot of the things last 2 years to even trust myself enough to make a huge transition. My whole life is here and has always been here. But so now what I feel like I'm stepping into, like, the next level of Izzy. And I don't fully know what that is, but it feels very creative. It feels very feminine. I feel like it's just my true self. And even though I feel today I'm my true self, it just feels like there's this other level out there. Definitely manifesting love. Like, I intuitively feel like my person is out there, whether it's my best friend or someone else. You know, like, I just feel something. And this, to some people listening, might be like, this is crazy. She's going on feeling. But that is part of your intuition, is that you'll continue to get the feeling. So this, and maybe sometimes it's a strong one that you haven't got before. But for me, this continued over 2 years to be this knocking, like, okay, California. I'm like, no. Okay, Cali. I'm like, oh. And so for me, it's just this feeling of knowing, like, there's something beautiful there for me, for my journey, my next level of self. I believe in love. Kind of like the next chapter. Just that whole next chapter. It's a big closing of a door here for me. And I think that's why sort of the recent breakdown of, like, just so many different things falling apart, losing my full-time, you know, to me I was like, oh, I have stability going out there. No, not anymore, right? But nothing's stopping me. And that's what's been really interesting internally, to be like, oh, I feel clearer than ever, despite all of the things that were going up in flames, that one might say, oh, I should just stay where I'm comfortable. And And I'm like, no, I still need to go there. This is what feels right. So I feel like a lot of space is being created, like being opened for me there.
That's wonderful. It feels like you have very pure, clean energy.
Thank you.
Just going there.
Yeah, yes.
Like you said, versus running or feeling fear and then acting upon it like we want to do. Like some of us either act upon fear or we hide.
100%.
But it's great that you were able to give yourself that space the past 2 years to really figure out what feels right.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
I know. So it feels
I'm happy
so,
for you.
Thank you. It feels really grounded. You know, I know like in Boston, so many of the things I do and I'm involved in communities, like my family, so it's not like it's like, oh, bye Boston, see you never. Absolutely not. I'm coming here in a couple months again. But it feels exciting to have just a new energy. And I also think, I think being kind of in the healing space in whatever capacity that is, it is difficult in Boston.
It is.
And while in some ways it's unique to be someone in it here, it is, I can't tell you, it's like constantly walking against a brick wall because Boston by nature, it's just, and not even in a political sense, it's just more of a conservative place in terms of like mindset. Very traditional. And so that's also been part of it for me where I'm like, I can't expand in the way I believe I'm meant to here. And so, it's like a calling, really.
I feel like on the West Coast, too, there's a big healing community.
Yes, for sure.
Culture. It's like California's like the big avocado. It's all about health and wellness.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Spiritual space and all the things that we're talking about. So I feel like it feels good.
Yeah,
for you.
I'm very excited.
That is thrilling. And what is one thing that you're really just letting go, leaving behind here? What part of Izzy are you leaving?
This is what I've been really sitting with the last few weeks, this question. It really feels like the Izzy, I'm shedding and leaving here Izzy that just did not feel good enough. And I think that's when I say like so many things have been burning down lately and just happening at the same time. It was like all the same theme, really. And it really feels like, honestly, there were so many themes tied to the last 10 years of my life specifically. Like from 20, I'm going to be 33 in a couple weeks, and it's like from 23 to now almost 33. And at 23, that was definitely a pivotal age for me, like in time in my life. That's when I got into that last very long-term, almost decade-long relationship. And, you know, there was a lot of emotional abuse. I was just having trauma come up really intensely for me. You know, how long I was at my job, just a lot of things closing. And so I think for me, it's about leaving here the self-limiting beliefs that I'm not good enough and leaving that version of myself. So love, and I think that's part of the healing journey. Like anyone listening, I look at all the versions of me, the parts of me now, and I'm like, I love that Izzy so much. Also, like, you can stay here. Or like, you don't need to keep showing up. Like, I got it now. Izzy today has it. And so like, I offer Izzy from the last decade, and my God, like so much love. She did everything she could to continue to work and heal and do all the things. But it's almost like those versions of me, I feel I'm shedding. That's like beautiful. Really big time. So again, it's a really interesting internal experience, but it feels really good.
Good. I'm so proud of you. That's huge. And for people who are listening who might be like, oh my gosh, these girls, like I don't understand anything, who are maybe like dabbling within the self-love journey, I have to say I started from more of a self-hatred space because I didn't love myself.
100%.
But I was all about personal development and being my best self, but it was because I didn't like myself. But then working and doing all this stuff that we're talking about got me to that healthier, happier place. But if someone's just starting to learn or dabble, what is the first thing or step that they should take to maybe start their own journey?
That's a great question. A lot of the work I initially do with clients and kind of many of the avenues I work with people is really first ask themselves, like, even if you ask them, like, who are you? What do you like? What do you enjoy to do? What are your hobbies? Any of these basic questions anyone listening might ask someone else. Like if you're interviewing someone, you go on a date, I want you to sit down honestly and ask yourself those questions. Because it is mind-blowing how when you ask these questions to themselves, they have no idea. They don't know who they are.
It's true.
And so I think that the first step is saying, like, who am I?
Yeah.
Because, and again, this can open up a lot for someone, but it's more about, you look at yourself and you're like, wait, I don't even know who I am.
Yeah.
But in some ways, instead of that feeling difficult and like defeating, there's so much exploration from there. Mm-hmm. So I always say to people, like, this is where you get to start being like, what did I like to do before the world told me I wasn't good at it? Yeah. What did I like to do that makes me happy that I'm not tying to an outcome?
Your child self.
Oh my, it's fascinating because people are like, the healing journey is constantly about getting back to who you were.
Yeah.
And it's true. And I love what you said of, you know, starting from a place where it's more self-hatred. And I think a lot of people get caught in, I don't like myself and I need to fix myself.
Yeah.
I need to buy all the books.
Yes.
Oh my God. I'm like, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
That was kind of how I started too. Like even the body image stuff, I was like, I need to fix this.
Same.
I need to like, but the fixing mentality is such a mentality rooted in like self-hate and shame and not acceptance. And so again, I think for people, it's like really first just saying, trying to get to know yourself, I think, is honestly the first step.
Yeah.
And it highlights oftentimes, again, like where there is pain existing. And then usually from there, that's when you can start to kind of open up the layers. But even sometimes like free journaling, like if you're like, just like free writing, like, how do I feel today? Even a gratitude list. People be amazed if they're like, huge. I don't feel grateful for anything. Well, that's actually a good place to start then because you're not feeling good in your life or you're not feeling happy or there's nothing in your life bringing you joy. Mm-hmm. What do I do in my free time? Well, I don't know. I only work. Like, these are so many questions that people should just honestly like date yourself.
That's what I was just gonna say.
Yes, and that's the world really pushed me to do that.
No, it's so true.
Yeah, even if you're in a relationship,
cheat and date yourself.
Yes, like I have one of my best girlfriends. I love that she is, you know, she's engaged and she like still goes on solo trips. Like,
I love that.
There are no rules in the sense where people do think like I can only. This was my narrative for years. I wanted to salsa for a long time. Yes. My ex-partner was not into it. So I never went because I was like, I can't go by myself.
Right.
Or people are waiting for the perfect body to wear a dress that they like. You know, we're waiting. All of a sudden we're 70 and we never did the thing we wanted. And so for me, it was so freeing, like scary, but I pushed myself to be like, there are so many things I want to do. I don't need a partner or even a friend. Like, I don't need someone to do these things. I want to go to that restaurant, no one's around. Great. I'm going to go by myself.
Totally.
I'm going to go to that dance class.
Yes.
And this is where people listening, this is how you build self-trust, self-worth, and self-confidence.
Huge.
Like, oh my God, people are so terrified to do it. I'm like, listen, no one actually cares what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, truly, we are the ones judging ourselves.
Totally.
So again, it's date yourself, get to know yourself. It will change your life.
100%. I love that. You should like write a book or do a pod on how to date yourself.
It's on my.
It's huge.
It's on my radar.
It's huge. No, it's. I was gonna say that everything you've said, I'm like, it's coming out of my brain. It's coming out of your mouth, which I love. But. So, yes, 100% date yourself. Ask yourself, would you date yourself?
Yes.
Would you hire yourself?
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people, and when I was suffering, or in my mind, internally suffering, I'm like, oh my God, I'm never going to find anyone.
Yeah.
I literally had to ask myself, would you date you?
Yeah.
And at the time, a couple of years ago, no.
Yeah.
And I was actually in a relationship where I was like, no, I wouldn't. I am not proud of who I am today. Mm-hmm. My self-worth was low.
Yeah.
I did not have integrity with external people that I wanted to. Like, it just didn't feel great.
Yeah. Yes.
But then you have to fix yourself. And the second you're like, okay, I would date me, that's when good things come into your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Or I would hire me, whatever you're focusing on.
100%. And so many people, the core feeling at the end of the day is not loving themselves, but like really not feeling good enough in whatever way that is. And so again, it's a muscle. It's like anything. You have to flex. And I saw something, it was something I think I saw on Instagram, or I don't know, but it was some analogy, but it made so much sense where the person talked about, you know, you can't, and even we talk about like expanding ourselves, like you can't go from the 5-pound weight to the 40-pound weight, right? But also the growth in the interim is not always comfortable. Like when I'm, you know, bicep curling a medium to heavy weight and I'm trying to push myself in that set, that muscle, it's like contracting, expanding. Mm-hmm. It has to grow, and there's discomfort in that. And then you get stronger though, and you can pick up the heavier weight and blah, blah, blah. I saw something also about, I think it was a dahlia, where they talked about this flower where it contracts and expands, but every time it does that, it gets a little bit bigger in its bloom. And they were like, this is the human experience.
Yeah.
Like, this is why when we were young, they're like, it's growing pains. That is it. Like, to get to that next, to love yourself, to date yourself. Yes, there's uncomfortability. And the first time you go out to dinner by yourself, like, I was uncomfortable.
Yes.
I was like, awkward, you know, like,
I'm awkward.
Yeah, exactly. So it's that
so
first
funny.
step that most people don't want to take, but it is the best step you'll take for yourself.
The best step. It's the hardest step.
Yes.
But then you have to keep walking forward. Because I
100%.
know so many amazing, talented people who start something big or launch something amazing, and then they stop.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you have to keep going.
Yes.
If I go back to my first, third, 25th, 78th podcast, like, it's probably not great.
Right.
But it's about the journey and about the internal experience that you're creating, and then the external. So
absolutely.
I love those analogies too.
Thank you.
Because it's a muscle, and you don't think it is because it's your brain, it's your soul, it's your mind, whatever you want to say. But just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Exactly. And it's also when you're called to something, whether, again, it's just quite literally an experience. Like, for me, like, I wanted to salsa for the longest time, but didn't. Again, another thing that I read, but I loved it so much, I actually recorded a podcast episode, like, on that sentiment, which was that imposter syndrome should truly actually be assigned to you, that you are going in the right direction.
Love.
Because when you're being called to something but you are petrified of doing it, it is an opportunity to expand and grow, and there's a reason you want that.
Yes.
And if you, like, think about it, like, I just don't think people ever in their lives woke up being like, no one is born being like, I'm the best at this thing and I'm so ready. But that is where all the good stuff happens. Yes. And so I loved that even sentiment of, like, if you are feeling imposter syndrome, say yes. And I do that all the time. I'm like, you know what? This thing is petrifying to me, and I'm saying yes to it. Yeah. And then you just continue to grow in your, like, most magical self in that process.
Just like California for you. You're
yes.
doing it. 100%. And I cannot wait to see you on the other side. Maybe next time I go to the West Coast, we'll link up, and then we'll talk about that side of the journey.
Oh, that would be such a treat.
This is just the beginning for you.
Yeah, that's how it feels.
Yeah. How exciting. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I so appreciate your energy, your time, your wisdom. I'm so glad we met. And can you please share with people how they can find you online and connect?
Yes. So I'm very active on my social media, which is Izzy.Atkinson. It's just my name. I'm always posting self-love, divine feminine, the wisdom, all the things. And then I have a podcast myself, the Make It Make Sense podcast. It's now on Apple and Spotify, which is really exciting. And those are really, right now, like, those are the ways to find me. My website is a little outdated, so
if you need help with that, let me know. I do websites.
I will, because that's, like, that's in the pipeline.
Love it.
But I love to connect with people. So seriously, like, I love connecting with people similar to you. So reach out at any point.
Cool.
Anyone tuning in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.